Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Ben Francis, and tonight, as usual, we'll start with the Ukraine update on day 967 of the conflict. Australia is to give 49 superseded M1A1 tanks to Ukraine, whose president sent his thanks for the quote-unquote brave donation, which he described as essential assistance in its defense against Russia's invasion. Australia's most recent $245 million dollar aid package, Australian dollar, I wasn't sure what that was, aid package for Ukraine also includes air defense missiles, guided weapons, anti-tank weapons, artillery, mortars, and small arms ammunition. The tanks bring Australia's total military aid contribution to Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February 2022 to about 1.3 billion Australian dollars, which includes 120 Bushmaster vehicles. A Russian military officer recently returned from fighting in Ukraine was assassinated in a village in the Moscow region. The Russia's TASS state news agency has reported the victim was named Nikita Klenkov, whom the independent news outlet in Important Stories named as a high-ranking officer in the GRU military intelligence service. Also, Volodymyr Zelensky will attend a NATO defense ministers meeting today, according to a NATO agenda. Zelensky unveiled his quote-unquote victory plan on Wednesday. Its major points include an invitation for Ukraine to join NATO and permission to use Western-supplied long-range missiles to strike military targets inside Russia, steps that have been met with reluctance by Kiev's allies so far. In his remarks to Ukraine's parliament, Zelensky said that Ukraine was not prepared for a quote-unquote frozen conflict or any trade-offs involving territory or sovereignty. North Korea must face sanctions for taking Russia's side in the war, Ukraine has told its allies. Zelensky told Ukraine's parliament on Wednesday that spy services had confirmed North Korea's supply of boats, weapons, and personnel. Quote, These are workers for Russian factories to replace Russians killed in the war, and personnel for the Russian army. In fact, this is the participation of a second state in the war against Ukraine on the side of Russia. The Kremlin has denied the allegation of North Korea sending people to become involved in the war. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said North Korea's involvement posed a huge threat of further escalation. Quote, We are approaching a new phase and new realities of war. President Biden will be in Germany on Friday on a whirlwind trip and hold talks with the Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The White House said the US President and Scholz would, quote, coordinate on geopolitical priorities, including Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression and events in the Middle East. The US President and Chancellor could be joined by the French President Emmanuel Macron and the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, according to unconfirmed media reports. Biden spoke to Zelensky on Wednesday and announced $425 million in further military aid, including air defenses, munitions, and armored vehicles, the White House said. 6 Russian soldiers who fled the war in Ukraine have just been granted temporary visas as they applied for political asylum in France, in what human rights activists describe as the first major case of a group of Russian deserters being admitted asylum to a European Union country. A Polish court has also sentenced a 26-year-old Ukrainian identified as Alexander D. to 2 years and 8 months imprisonment for trying to recruit a Polish citizen to spy against military aid efforts to Ukraine. Russia claimed to have captured 2 more Ukrainian villages, Krasny Yar, that's how you pronounce it, south of the town of Minograd, which lies close to the Pokrovsk, and Nevesky, which lie in the Luhansk region near the border of the Donetsk. And now moving on to the Middle East with our Israel-Gaza latest. At least 42,438 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 100,000 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October, according to a statement by the Gaza Health Ministry. Israeli police and military said in a joint statement today that dental images have been submitted to the police forensics lab and DNA testing is in progress. It added that on completion of this process, it would be, quote, able to confirm the assassination of Yahya Sinwar. Hamas sources told Reuters that indication suggests that Sinwar was killed in an Israeli operation in the Gaza Strip. There has been no response from Hamas at the time of writing. The Israeli Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, said that Sinwar was dead despite a positive formal identification yet being confirmed. In a statement, the Israeli Prime Minister's office said that no hostages were believed to have been present at the site of the killing in the Gaza Strip, where the IDF said, quote, 3 terrorists were eliminated. President Biden was briefed aboard Air Force One while heading to Germany after Israel said it was checking whether or not it killed the leader of Hamas. Biden, on his way to Berlin for talks with European leaders, was being kept abreast of developments on board the presidential plane. The Times of Israel reported that a senior Israeli official said that there was a, quote, high likelihood that one of the 3 militants the IDF said it killed in Gaza today was Sinwar. The Times of Israel wrote, quote, according to reports, officials believe with high certainty that the body was that of Sinwar, but it was anticipated that a firm identification would take a number of hours. Israel's Kan Radio reported that the Hamas leader, if confirmed dead, was killed, quote, by chance and not as a result of intelligence gathering by Israel. The station also said the bodies were found with lots of cash and fake identification. Al-Majad, a Hamas-linked website that usually publishes about security issues, has urged Palestinians to wait for information about Sinwar from the group itself and not rely on Israeli media outlets, which it said aimed to break their spirit. Al Jazeera staff had to evacuate their offices in downtown Beirut this afternoon after receiving messages warning them to leave the building. Similar to past evacuation warnings from Israel that preceded bombings, the network reported 2 embassies, one of which is the Norwegian embassy, is also housed in the same building where Al Jazeera was evacuated. The office is located in the heart of downtown Beirut, about a kilometer from the iconic Blue Mosque and Martyr Square, where displaced people are now residing. Also, about 345,000 Palestinians face, quote, catastrophic levels of hunger this winter after aid deliveries fell. A UN-backed assessment said today, warning of the persistent risk of famine across the Palestinian territory. And on to our first story of the night. Sir Tom Hunter pays for Alex Salmond's body to be flown back to Scotland. Following the Scottish Government's announcement yesterday that a private citizen would provide the financial support to bring Alex Salmond's body back to Scotland, it has emerged today that it is Sir Tom Hunter who has agreed to cover the costs or reparation. Sir Tom Hunter confirmed today that he had paid for Alex Salmond's body to be flown home from North Macedonia after speculation in the media about who had funded the private charter flight to bring Alex Salmond's body back home on Friday. Mr. Hunter said he wanted to end the media speculation, saying in a statement, quote, while he and I disagreed with some of his ambitions, Alex Salmond devoted his life to Scotland and the Scottish people, and as such, he and, importantly, his family deserve the dignity and privacy of a private return to the home of his birth, end quote. And now moving on to our next story in economic news. There have been calls for the Chancellor to fix the soaring cost of car insurance in the UK at the upcoming October budget. The Scottish National Party has challenged the Chancellor to, quote, finally get a grip on the soaring cost of UK car insurance, end quote, at the forthcoming budget and deliver on election promises made to motorists. As new research shows, insurance costs in the United Kingdom have increased significantly more than our European neighbours. During the general election campaign, the Labour Party promised to, quote, urgently call in the regulators to crack down on any unfair practices and to come clean on the causes of soaring costs for consumers. New research from the House of Commons Library commissioned by the Scottish National Party has found that between May 2021 and July 2022, UK car insurance premiums rose by a total of 82%. In contrast, car insurance costs in neighbouring EU countries only rose by about 20%. The analysis also reveals that the cost of car insurance has continued to soar by 38% in the last year, despite a wider fall in inflation. With UK government ministers meeting insurance bodies this week, the SNP has warned, quote, smaller price rises won't cut it for customers. It's time for car insurance costs to finally come down. Commenting, SNP economy spokesperson Dave Dukin MP said, quote, at the general election, the Labour Party promised voters it would tackle the soaring cost of car insurance. The UK budget will be the test of whether or not they will honour that pledge, or if it's destined to become yet another broken promise. Inflation might be easing, but the crippling cost of car insurance is only getting worse, and it's now in danger of being locked in permanently. It's time for the Labour government to get a grip on the soaring costs of a UK car insurance industry where prices always rise like a rocket but fall like a feather. Moving on to our next story, calls for Scottish Labour to back a bill today to allow a Scottish visa. Following the announcement by the Home Office that it would not consider a separate Scottish visa scheme, the SNP's Scotland and Foreign Affairs spokesperson at Westminster, Stephen Gethin, MP, said, quote, during the election campaign, Scottish Labour claimed a Labour government was open to a Scottish visa, but now we know the truth, and it's the same old Westminster story, big promises and no delivery. Quote, this is incredibly embarrassing for Scottish Labour, and it's the Scottish economy and our National Health Service that will pay the price for this chaos as we continue to face crippling staff shortages thanks to Westminster's hard Brexit and immigration policies. Labour's John Grady MP told a Westminster Hall debate on Tuesday that the UK government was working on proposals to bring more workers to Scotland. However, his remarks were dismissed by the Home Office in a statement which read, quote, this is not government policy and not something the Home Secretary is considering. On social media, the MP for Western Isles has also said, quote, when it comes to immigration policy, one size does not fit all. It shouldn't be beyond us to devise ways to attract more people to work and settle here. Now the SNP has called, end quote. Now, the SNP has called on Anna Sarwar to instruct Scottish Labour MPs to back a Scottish National Party bill to allow the creation of a unique Scottish visa to address labour shortage in Scotland. Stephen Gethin MP is seeking an amendment to the Scotland Act 1998 to enable the Scottish Government to establish the scheme. The move will come as part of a 10-minute rule bill that Mr Gethin has called on Scottish Labour MPs to back. The SNP had long called for a Scottish visa to address labour shortage in Scotland due to Brexit and the Westminster anti-immigration policies, with the Scottish Government publishing detailed proposals on how a scheme could work. And now moving on to our next story, also on Westminster. Number 10 tells ministers that departmental cuts must be absorbed by efficiency drive. Downing Street has warned ministers to make their departments more productive rather than asking for more money, as fractious negotiations over this month's spending review enter their final stage. Officials said today that many ministers would have to accept tough cuts to their departments as part of the spending review, which will be announced alongside the budget on the 30th of October. Any of those wanting to protect important public services would have to make them more cost efficient, Number 10 has added. The warning comes after three cabinet ministers wrote to the Prime Minister complaining about the cuts they were being asked to make by the Chancellor Rachel Reeves and her Chief Secretary Darren Jones. Treasury ministers have been negotiating the details of the spending review for weeks, but with less than 2 weeks ago until it's announced, several departments have not yet agreed their individual settlements. Reeves sent her, quote, major measures to be assessed by the Office for Budget Responsibility on Wednesday night, but does not have to send the OBR details of what each individual department is getting. The Free Cabinet Ministers, Housing Secretary Angela Rayner, Transport Secretary Louise Haigh, and Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood wrote to the Prime Minister yesterday to express their concern about the effect the cuts would have on their departments. And now moving on to a European story, the European Central Bank cuts investment rates. The European Central Bank has intervened to promote growth in the Eurozone economy with its first back-to-back interest rate cut since the Euro crisis in 2011. With inflation tumbling across the 20 members of the single currency bloc, the European Central Bank followed a reduction in the cost of borrowing at its previous meeting in September with a further 0.25% cut in its key deposit rate to 3.25%, marking the third interest rate cut this year. The ECB's president, Christine Lagarde, said the fall in inflation had surprised the central bank and meant a cut was needed to ensure a soft landing for the Eurozone economy. Figures out earlier today revealed annual prices growth in the Eurozone had increased in September to 1.7%, down from 2.2% the previous months. Lagarde said that there were clear signs from most measures of business and consumer activity that the economy was weakening. Lagarde said, quote, the latest data is all heading in the same direction, downwards, and points to more sluggish growth. She refused to indicate whether there would be further rate cuts, saying the central bank would remain dependent on the data before making further cuts at its next meeting in December. In the US, the Federal Reserve has indicated it is considering cutting rates in the coming months after instituting its first reduction last month, a half-point cut. Announcing its decision, the ECB said the reduction in interest rates was based on, quote, an updated assessment of the inflation outlook, the dynamics of underlying inflation, and the strengths of monetary policy transmission. It added that the incoming information on inflation shows that the disinflationary process is well on track. The inflation is also affected by recent downside surprises in indicators of economic activity. And now on to a story on America. Harris maintains lead over Trump among black swing state voters. A new poll has found that Kamala Harris continues to lead Donald Trump among black likely voters in battleground states. The poll, conducted by Howard University, initiated on public opinion from the 2nd to 8th of October, surveyed nearly 100 black likely voters in the states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The results showed that 84% of respondents said they planned to vote for the vice president, while only 8% said they would support Trump in the election. The survey also identified the most important issues for the respondents was, quote, democracy/voting rights, ranked as a top priority, followed by the economy and abortion. About 63% of respondents indicated that they were, quote, very excited about voting in November. When asked their opinion of Harris, 61% responded very favorably opinion of the vice president, while only 14% held a very unfavorable opinion of her. In contrast, 10% of respondents viewed Trump as, quote, very favorable, and 74% reported a very unfavorable opinion of the former president. The margin for error in this poll is plus or minus about 3%. Harris's support among black likely voters in this poll is 2 percentage points higher than her support in the similar survey conducted in September by Howard University. In that poll, Harris received support from among 82% of the respondents. Trump received more support among black likely voters in that September poll than the new October poll. In September, 12% 12% of the respondents indicated that they would vote for him, compared with only 8% this time. And looking at the time, I think I'm going to have to finish up now. But before I go, I don't have time for that. Fine. Yeah, I know. I'm saying that we're ending the show. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We face costs of over £4,000 each month, but only receive donations of around £2,500. We urgently need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debt as well. We are at a crisis point and really need to increase our donations to be able to pay our bills and survive. Our programs will always be free to view, but if you can afford just £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.